Welcome to another episode of the Under the Pines podcast. I'm your host, Max Emanuel, and this is another conversation that gives me hope. Hope that there's many other humans out there that actually think that this transition into the new world is actually going to end well for us. I have to admit, during COVID, my optimism took a hit, but with these types of conversations and whilst getting to know humans like Brooke, I'm actually very positive about this realm. I see hope. I see good things on the horizon. I sincerely hope that you walk away from these episodes as a better human with a positive mindset and with optimism in your heart. Brooke is a pioneer in the fascia space. She works on topics that interest me greatly, especially since I got to endure a lot of pain due to me not having the needed knowledge back then. I really hope you get value out of this, and I'll see you in the next one.
I would love to.
Yeah, hello, Brooke.
Hi.
Well, it's a real pleasure that you found the time, and I just wanted to start with something that I read that you wrote, which is beautiful. Imagine your breath as the singer of an orchestra, your fascia as the strings vibrating with every note, and your brain as the wise composer guiding it all. When these elements are in sync, you don't just live, you thrive. Stress melts, creativity flows, and resilience becomes your second nature. It's very nice when I read that. So that's just a little overview, I would say, of what we'll talk about today. But, my wife basically showed me your account, and I'm very grateful for that because my dark night of the soul was all about these topics, right? It was all connected to fascia. It was all connected to dehydration. Obviously, I didn't know that at the time, but, I hope this conversation will help people that, might be in that same situation at some point. So I'm very happy that we'll talk about this today.
Yeah, me too.
Sure. Okay, so your story starts with golf, basically, right? Like your physical kind of story in that realm. And
yeah, golf was a big part, but singing was, I think, the beginning.
Singing,
breathing. I sang and danced since I was a kid. I think it was the first thing I did.
Okay.
And singing brings you deep into the breath. And my family brought me to a house as a kid with these giant trees, and I would climb these giant trees and sing to them. And when you're singing outside, it's a little different than inside because your sound gets lost on the air. So to sing mightily, to breathe really big and sing really loud was something I didn't realize was happening. I would be mowing our 3-acre lawn and then singing over the sound of the lawnmower. And I think singing at this kind of belting capacity was my first introduction to how the breath changes the body. And when I was about 16, I started playing golf. And golf is such a ground-driven sport that my relationship to upper body torque and building momentum and efficiency simulated a lot more of acrobatic and kung fu style stuff. My initial introduction to the breath was through all of my singing and singing in these big trees and singing over the lawnmowers. And then as I got into golf, the way that I was trained, because I was so small, was all about efficiency. And that really got me into my feet and the power that you can drive by harnessing your weight. And in golf, you're swinging a club with your hands, but you actually are building momentum with the power and drive of your weight from your feet to your hips to your shoulders. And this really got me into how the skeleton is reacting like rubber bands from the bottom up. And every hockey player knows this. Every lacrosse player knows this. Golfers, if we step into throwing a ball, even if you want to throw that ball really far, you got to step into your forward foot and then drive that motion through the body. And that's essentially what the fascia science is all about. To me, it's going to show us athletes what we've been playing with this entire time. It's way less of muscles when you're building momentum through an athletic motion. It's rubber bands torquing over each other and then you controlling the release of those rubber bands. So my fascia technique varies because I look at the body from the ground up. And that's definitely prompted from golf.
Yeah, there's so many different angles we could take this, right? Because, I do martial arts. I used to play a lot of tennis when I was younger. But, when I really started thinking about this for the first time, I always had injuries on my ankle, and also at that time that I mentioned before, around my Saturn return is when that heavy time in my life started. I
Mm,
had this injury on my ankle once again, couldn't move for a bit. Then I had emotional trauma come in,
mm.
right? Girlfriend, friend, and business all together. And all of a sudden I find myself in so much pain, right? My whole neck closed up, right? Like the whole side was burning literally to the fingers, right?
Yeah, she was a weight on your shoulder, literally.
And I couldn't move. I couldn't sleep, right? Any painkiller wouldn't work. Like, took opiates, nothing would work, right? And then later I found out I had an injury on my, in the middle of my neck, like an old
Mm,
injury that I didn't know about, right? But like after I got it, okay, it's the fascia, right? It's all connected with the fascia, right? It's pulling on that soft, basically on my weak spot, right? The weakest point in the
yes.
body will show up in these times, right? And obviously, if I would have listened to, the first professor that, we visited, or actually we went to so many and nobody really knew what was happening. They had no idea. All these specialists, right? Spine specialists, nerve specialists, nobody knew what the fuck was going on, right? And then, eventually I ended up at an osteopath, a very skilled one. And he was the one that kind of pulled me out of it, right? Like just therapy, like 4 times a week, 5 times a week for, a
Mm.
year and a half, basically. And that was the one that understood fascia, right? He understood it's all connected, and we just dove in deep. And that was kind of my deep dive and then that topic. And it was just baffling to me because none of these professionals, they knew about this, right? They didn't even think about it. They were just like, okay, this is,
Yeah.
where's the injury, right? Like your whole arm burns, and that's a nerve issue. Okay, and later they found out, okay, it's from the neck, it's a nerve thing. But why is that? Why did it come up, right? So many years after that, right? There was no
Yeah.
explanation to this.
So until recently, and still a lot of doctors are under the impression that fascia is just connective tissue. It's just the thing that holds other things together and not important. And everything's shifted since 2018. And I like to show people this image instead. The
Yeah.
fascia is less of a saran wrap. Like, many people have been introduced to myofascia release. And myofascia, just myo means muscle. So they were talking about the fascia that wraps around the muscle. But what they've found in the last handful of years is that the fascia itself is more like hairs, and this hair has different densities through the body. So if you take your tongue and put it on the side of your cheek, that's mostly collagen. That's what fascia is made out of. So fascia is made of collagen. Collagen is in a triple helix shape, which means it's more like a tube, more like a tiny little nano vein instead of just a little string that's connecting things. And this little nano vein is moving a fluid through it and then also around it. And the fluid that's going through the fascia is what's being argued about all over the world right now in the research clinics. The Chinese doctors are saying this is cheese force. Some of the American doctors are saying this is plasma. Some of the German doctors are saying it's lymphatic fluid. So that's the huge disagreement, and why many doctors don't want to touch it, because there's not enough evidence out there to say what this is. But they know that electricity is moving through it.
Mm.
And that the fluid around the little nanotubules that make everything glide is called hyaluronic acid. And you can actually experience hyaluronic acid systemically through the body. When we cry, that's mostly hyaluronic acid. Our saliva is mixed with hyaluronic acid and a couple of enzymes. The fluids that come out of us when we're turned on, that's hyaluronic acid mixed with things. And then the synovial fluid between our joints is super dense hyaluronic acid. So it's all through the system, helping these little braided structures move. And everything's great when we're kids and this hyaluronic acid is moving through it and it's hydrated. It's not until we create tears or injuries that this starts to heal itself. So let's just say in your neck, you ruptured it and there was a huge rip in that area. Well, the fascia is actually what builds and stitches those rips back together. And if you can locate a scar on your body, you can kind of see how the dermis is a little bit different. It's a little lighter. It's not the same color. It
Yeah.
doesn't quite sunburn. That's fascia. That's collagen that stitched itself back together. And when it's superficial like this, it can kind of stitch itself back together, not create much damage. But when we injure super deep layers, Imagine these layered on top of each other like a lasagna, and you have a deep tear in one of them. So it can heal on the superficial line, right? Or on the superficial tissues. But then deep, if we don't recondition those, they actually start to pull. And this creates an issue in our skeleton overall. So let's just say if you had like a moderate calf tear at some point, you were jumping out of your friend's tree, you hit something weird, you injured it. It might have healed up fine, but if we didn't recondition the deep fascia, you might have like a big adhesion in the upper part of the calf. And then as we train over that as athletes, as we go out and play the next day and we start to reestablish new tissue over this, it's going to start to just kind of slightly pull that joint out of place, because now this isn't fluid. Now there's something knotted up and impinging and pulling on it. And this is my theory at why people have knees that are developing at different ages. So some athletes I work with, one of their knees is like in a 50-year-old condition and the other one's perfectly fine. And I believe it's not because of one issue or another. These are just old injuries that have been living within us, and we just need to brush them out. When we brush them out, the torque on top of that joint reestablishes. So that's as simple as I can try to make it. But it's not to me, it's not the doctor's fault that they don't know. They weren't trained. It's going to take another 20 years for medical science to catch up. In the meantime, as athletes, let's just start taking care of it.
Yeah. I mean, I can agree. I've seen a lot of stuff like that, and it's like shoulder pain, on the right side comes from the left foot and stuff like that, right? Like it's all,
I actually
on the axis.
Built this replica of Arnold Nelson's tensegrity model. You saw this on my Instagram probably. And that's what I try to get through, because everybody I work with has a shoulder issue or a neck issue. And they're like, listen, it's cute that you do it from the ground up, but I have an issue with my shoulder. And I'm like, it's cute that you think it's coming from your shoulder. Exactly. Because when we look at the hip tilt, everything's going to be dictated there. So if somebody has huge lower body tension on one side, it's going to pull the hip down. Then the upper body is going to craft 1,000 ways to keep it square. And the way that I work with people is I basically ignore their pain and we just treat the structure. There's a lot of people that are getting good results using moderately aggressive techniques, in my opinion. When they're healing the fascia, they're ripping it. They're finding the stuck points and ripping those stuck points. As an athlete who does a lot of modalities that require full body motion, like even as a guitar player, if I hurt my finger, I'm affected for the next month, if I smash it somewhere. So I want to do a fascia technique that has no downtime, that doesn't tear anything. And that's what the sequences that I made for fascia is really all about. But that's just one small part, right? Because our brain is way more fascinating. The fascia is just happening to be the scaffolding that holds our nervous system into place. And as they've uncovered, wow, the fascia isn't just wrapping the muscles. There's actually no muscle or tendon in the body that's connected to bone. It's all connected to fascia first. So fascia is the scaffolding that's holding the bones, the nerves, the tissues, the joints, everything into place. And if the fascia is impinged, right? So if we open up a dead body, the veins lay flat and the arteries will stay open, but the veins lay flat. There's like a compression. There's the way that the geometry is made in the body. It can just kind of lay. This fascia is the same way. These little nanotubules are made so efficiently geometrically that if we have tension, they can just collapse on top of each other. So the way that I look at the fascia is this collapsing thing is what we want to open back up. Because if there's flow in the fascia, then that hydration feeling comes back. Then everything starts to glide. What just felt stuck and bundled together, instead of ripping it open, we're just going to gently re-stimulate that hydrating process and kind of pump those nanotubules full of fluid again. And to me, that's been the easiest way to fix the structure. Open the flow.
Yeah. With me, it was, I only realized, that my lifestyle was such a big part of the problems that I had, right? Because I was basically an addict, drinking a lot of drugs and stuff like that. And I was always exercising, right? And always, sauna and all that kind of stuff, but it just doesn't work together, right? It's just walking against the wall constantly, right? So that hydration part is so crucial. And I think, we don't talk about this enough. So, this topic is great. So both of my parents, they're in the medical field, and I was lucky, because my dad, he's also a homeopath, and foot reflexology and acupuncture was always like in my face, when I was a kid. But nonetheless, we have this Western medicine, and every time I bring something new to the table when I talk to them, it's always like, yeah, okay, where's the evidence? Where's the science, and like all that kind of stuff, right? So it's a tough one, right? We'll just need to work a bit longer and harder, and I guess it will get there. But it is an interesting one. You just said in the beginning as well. It interlinks into spirituality, right? Like it's these things that we don't fully understand, right? There's stuff there, electricity, the light body, right? Like it's all vibration and frequency and brain waves. We can talk about that as well, and it's just all connected, right?
There is a beautiful thing about bringing people into the deep tissue of the fascia that I've
Mm.
seen happen over and over by accident. And in my classes, when we do a deep fascia reset, often I bring people into fascia before the breath because of what happens to the nervous system. So when I pull them into feeling spaces that were previously offline in the body, because our brain hates being in pain, it would much prefer to dull feeling than to give you chronic pain. So it'll give us messages for a couple weeks, and then if we don't listen,
Mm.
it'll kind of turn off those mechanoreceptors. And when we go through this work, we're turning those mechanoreceptors back online. And instead of encouraging any talking, or oftentimes there's people that kind of butt up against feelings that are uncomfortable. And what I encourage them to do is to sit in stillness and silence with it and witness it as it changes. Because 90 seconds into a compression hold, there is so much that's happening within the tissues as long as you're hydrated. So we go through that sequence, and then we take them deeper and deeper into the body. And when you do that, you start to realize how numbed out people are from the body. They're not feeling how shallowly they're breathing. They didn't feel what 2 inches under their left thigh felt like in a long time. They just revisited an injury that they had at 12. So as you bring people into the body with the intention of stillness and silence, there's so many things happening to people.
Yeah.
There's so much internal healing just by encouraging them to stay with their breath and stay within the body. And if we look at a magnetic frequency structure and we look at the nervous system's ability, right? Because our brain is beautiful, but the brain is nothing without the nervous system. And the nervous system is amazing, but if there's fascia tension and impingements, it's not going to be operating fully. So my whole goal with my business is to bring people to gamma. To me, that's the exploration I'm on, and I would love to be surrounded by like-minded members who are en route to that so we can share notes along the way. And I can't not reflect on how important the fascia and the breath is to that as a radio tower. So relaxing into the body more like a magnetic frequency, like looking at the body literally as a radio tower. If we want to make the radio tower stronger, we have to anchor it into the earth. So have all of the mechanoreceptors on both feet completely active, open, and flowing. So there's no issues with taking in electrons from the feet. And the feet have so many mechanoreceptors. It's similar to our hand. Our tongue has the most, our genitalia has the most, but our feet are relaying information all the time to parts of our brains that other parts of our body don't. So the feet being open and with full mobility, so like separation in the phalanges, and then super deep shaped breaths that can drop your breath rate to about 4 BPMs. To me, that's like the highest breath per minute that we want to have if we want to transcendentally meditate, or like, get into other brainwave spaces. 4 breaths a minute to me is top of the, like, as fast as you want to be breathing, which is just a 7-second inhale, 8-second exhale, and it's easiest sequence. So most people I can feel can handle that if they experience the breath with a shape. So if you breathe through your nose and you inhale and fill the belly first, then keep the air there, then inhale more, fill your back, then inhale more, fill the sides, then the chest. And when we exhale, we empty the chest, then the sides, then the back, and at the very end, the belly. And by doing that, we're optimizing how our lung tissue is actually shaped. We have most of our lung tissue at the bottom of the lung field. So by playing with where we're holding the gases inside of the lung field, it becomes way easier to slow the breath rate down. And as we do that, that's when the brain has the opportunity to make these childlike jumps back into theta, that place of imagination, that slow space where the neurons can actually crossfire and invent new stuff. That's the space that seekers and creatives, to me, problem solvers, thought leaders, this is where we go when if chaos is around you, right? Who's the problem solver? Who's going to be able to think clearly amongst the war and come up with the solutions? And it's to me, it's going to be the people that have low tension in their body and know how to reduce their breath rate. And those people, no matter what's happening in the world, are going to be able to access creative thought, new creative thought, not just doing what we always have done, but doing something new and being able to visually conceptualize the consequences of that. That takes incredible neuroplasticity. And I think it's something that we can empower our mind to do if we continue to restore fluidity within the body and we keep a mighty breath. I think the brain is significantly more powerful than we are currently experiencing it at.
I mean, for sure. Like, if you just dabble a little bit with plant medicine, you know that it's a supercomputer, right? Like, we're just experiencing just a few percent of what we actually, are able to experience, right? And we couldn't live the way, at 100% or even, more than what we experience right now. But like, it's there, right? Like, it's just not visible, right?
My
And
brother
it's such
said
an
this.
interesting topic. Yeah.
Yeah, my brother said this thing about plant medicine that I love. And he's like, you're only a mushroom away, just one little mushroom away from experiencing all of that right here. And is it the mushroom or is it your ability to open your mind? So people that do plant medicine regularly, are we just tuning ourselves to the doorway that it elevates our brain to? And to me, I want to be exploring those spaces sober. I want to find that bridge because part of it, I wonder how much part of it is just a placebo for those of us that return to it. Is it just the doorway opens and then you're like, okay, let's go back to the doorway. But what do we really need to keep recalibrating? When I've hung out with some medicine men, people that are in 50-year learning processes with different 7-year dietas with tobacco, they say that as you embody the medicine and the medicine becomes part of you, you need less and less of it to trip. You can actually just tune into the frequency of it and you can elevate your frequency there. And that's always vibed with me. I'm always like, wow, how much do we still not know?
That's what I'm saying. The more I learn, the less I know, right? Like, it's always present for me. I just had Dakota Wind and David Reed on a podcast recently, and we just talked about that. We talked about spiritual practice, right? That in the end, it's all about spiritual practice, and it looks different for everyone, right? And we also talked about the monks, right? Like, that are just meditating every day and all day, right? And Dakota even, gave DMT to a monk, right? Because he wanted to see his reaction. And that guy basically said, why would I basically want to see the light for just 5 minutes, right? I want to see the light all the time. It's exactly what you just said. It's not about, these compounds, right, that we, take in. It's that state that we should strive toward, that could be in all the time if we, excel at this, but it's fucking hard. So people just want to, take something in and do it like the quick route.
I think it can be easy. Like you have 2 kids, right? So if we learned how to breathe when we were younger, I feel like we get way closer because a lot of us adults are cleaning up bad habits that we didn't know were bad habits. But when we do
Unlearning.
Yeah, exactly. The unlearning versus if the next generation grew up and they knew what proper oral posture was, they knew how to slow their breath rate, they knew the shape of the breath. And then they started doing a fascia flow technique at 15. I mean, they won't live with joint pain and they won't live with some of the asthma. There's a lot of people that are under the understanding that the lungs don't clean themselves, and they do. You just have to condition the lungs to clean out. Most people think that you can just breathe nose or mouth. And it's like, no, when you actually look at the physiology, our nose is meant to be for breath. Our mouth is meant for eating. So as we deeply breathe through the nose, and I often tell people this little awareness is kind of mind blowing. Close your eyes and breathe through the nose. And now just experience where you felt the air in the nose. Was it just at the tip, or could you pull the air all the way up to in between your eyebrows? So the nasal glands are way bigger. We're usually operating on like 10% of them only in the bottom. Now, then they actually come all the way out to the middle of your eye. So take another breath and then try to expand the airway underneath of the eyes. And if you have any congestion, you can actually just massage your face open.
I'm good. I'm good these days.
I like it. When we start to open and tone the nasal glands, there's this cleaning that happens because the adenoids are right back here. This is our first line of defense, and how our body communicates with what's outside of the body is all through our nose. So our first experience with the outside world, other than eating, is our breath. And then as we breathe, most of us are just breathing at such a small capacity, but by shaping the air through the nostrils, you actually notice our nasal glands come all the way up just underneath our frontal lobe. And when we inhale properly through the nose, we create this vibration, and it cleans, it moves through vibration, this cerebral fluid. So in my part of the world, there's a lot of people that get diagnosed with frontal lobe Alzheimer's, like frontal lobe dementia.
Yeah.
They forget where they put their keys. You'll notice a lot of them are chronic mouth breathers. So after 50 years of depriving your frontal lobe of this little vibration, it could be, we experience brain fog, we experience short-term memory loss. But it can all be remedied just by breathing properly throughout our lives, and then learning how to play with this. So the hard palate is that little bone that separates the mouth from the nose, and there's a suture that actually runs down through it. So our head's put together in these little bones and plates. And as we vibrate or hum, we can actually reestablish this vibration between the plates of the skull. This activates latent stem cells. It corrects deviated septum issues. It corrects teeth issues. There's some incredible case studies, people that needed rhinoplasty that just vibrated their way back into proper bone growth over 6 weeks. It's amazing. But for the meditator,
just to get back to that fluid, right? Because before we digress, like I also learned that it can only flow in a deep sleep state, right? It only, that's what I heard,
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. So what happens, right? Like, because you said it's, with chronic mouth breathers, right? Breathers, but I also think like these type of people that have actually shitty sleep, right? They're just not, sleeping properly. So it cannot, take those toxins out of that area, right? Like maybe that's connected there.
I think so too. Right. I mean, the breath is making so many systems work properly or improperly. And what the snoring apnea is, like if you're a mouth breather, the tongue becomes really lazy, right? And the tongue's just a muscle, so it starts to sag down here. And then if the tongue gets super lazy, what happens is when you mouth breathe at night, the tongue will actually slip back and will block the airflow. And when they experience that as snoring apneas. And in America, there's so much research around snoring apneas, and they hook people up on these uncomfortable devices, and some person has to stop with you. And what I tell people to do is tongue exercises. Just do tongue exercises. Get your tongue back where it's supposed to be inside of the mouth, which is lifted and held against the soft palate, which is back here. So I'm sure you're familiar.
It changes even the structure of the skull, right? Like if you mouth breather, like
the jaw, the teeth, right? You're swallowing, how the nasal gland tissues and the cilia fibers are draining, how the adenoids and the tonsils are holding. And that's just the physiology. Because as soon as you start reading like Indian literature, when you get into tongue position, there is infinite stuff about the magnetics and the electricity when you have your tongue placed properly, what it's doing in the brain for the circuit. So it just depends on which culture's literature you want to look at. Right. But tongue position could be damaging so many people's ability to think creatively, so many people's locked jaw because they're not holding stress there. I'm actually going to a conference at the end of the month. I'm so excited with this doctor from Australia who's been teaching biohack mechanisms about teeth and tongue. And if we do this again, I'll fill you in on what he said. But I'm so excited. Sure. He's flying over here to do this conference. All about it, all about the things that we are overlooking greatly.
Yeah, teeth are a big one. I kind of went down that rabbit hole a little bit, with wisdom teeth, and they're all pretty much very important, and we take them out, at such an early age. And then also, we have these what do you guys call them in English? Like to straighten up the teeth.
Oh yeah,
What are they called?
braces,
Exactly, the
braces.
braces, right? Like, but like
Yeah.
these, you remember those ones from before that were like connected with like a
Oh
like a
yeah.
string here, where like your whole like your brain is still developing, right? And you're growing, and it's all like just closed up, right? And like you're in a prison, right? And it was just normal, right, back in the day. And I mean, sure, now we have these Invisaligns and whatnot, but like it's so crazy what we do to our kids, right?
It
And
is, and then
I
we
mean,
shove them in
you probably
shoes.
know, right,
Shove
right,
them in
yeah.
shoes
I
that
mean,
are
my
too closed. We were an
my kids,
experimental
they just wear
generation.
barefoot. They just wear
Good.
barefoot shoes. That's
Yeah.
that's like straight from the beginning. And since I know about that kind of stuff, I'm also working on my feet. But like, it's fairly easy. When you do martial arts, you always kind of barefoot, and like you have that stability. But I mean, just look at all these feet right out there. Especially in the summer, like it's it's crazy. And then they wonder why the hips aren't aligned, and then why they have shoulder problems and neck problems, right? Like it's all connected.
Dancers and martial artists
Yeah.
and yoga people are like the only people that train barefoot for the most part. And I'm
Mm.
starting to see it now in the weightlifting gyms. I have a lot of friends in different networks down here, and I love like training with different people because everybody's got their own. Like the fighters just go so hard. It's like just to be around the energy once a week, you're like, okay, I can work out harder. But those are the only people that are really training with no shoes. You go to a standard gym, everything's indoors under fluorescent light with
Yeah.
recycled air on all of these linear equipment things. Everybody's in these tight neoprene plastic suits sweating, and it's all a little broken. So I go and work out outdoors at a gymnastics gym, and it's war money. The training is unbelievable. And I just look at the people that are out there and I'm like, these are people we're working out outside in 95-degree weather in South Florida, sometimes with pouring rain, and none of us would give it back for anything. Like, no, give me the outdoor playground workout. Like, there's no gym that can touch that. And then
No,
you're
there's something that
barefoot.
happens. Yeah, that's something that happens, right? When you like in the natural light and you're training, right? Like that whole mechanism, that whole response to the training is different, right? And I think nobody that hasn't tried it understands what it is. It's just different, right? Like,
Hmm.
do you know what the difference is there? Why it's so much better, for the mitochondria and stuff? Like, did you have an idea?
There's 100 physiological things that happen, but I honestly think that the vibe that I get is it's more ancient. There's something
Mm,
very interesting when we do things that the ancients used to do.
yeah.
And I did an experiment when I was 24, 25. I lived in a teepee for a year. And in the teepee,
Mm,
I had no electricity. It was just a huge canvas, 30-foot high teepee. And I had just a clear pine cabinet to hold some of my clothes and my guitar. And then this very basic bed. So very basic. And the only lighting I had was fire. And there was a few moments. I'm so sorry.
it's all good. Everybody that has dogs gets it.
Yeah. There's a few moments that I had that I felt I blipped who Brooke was. When we recreate what our ancient ancestors were doing, I think that we have an opportunity to access different things. So, like playing outside with a bamboo stick at dawn should be experienced by everybody. Going out under the full moon and stretching deeply, that should be experienced by everyone. Because, okay, yeah, there's all this beautiful stuff happening in our biology, but we are also part of an infinite timeline. Like, we have blood in us that lived long before all of this tech did. And I think that when we do what they did, we can kind of activate some different things. And I know that's not sciencey and maybe it falls into a hella woo woo space, but when I'm working
No,
out outside with nothing but a bamboo stick and I'm barefoot and I'm just with my breath and the sounds of the birds, I do feel like I'm connected to a deeper source that is more ancient. It's something that I don't feel on a computer. you know.
no, definitely not. Yeah, I think that's kind of what we're, you know, like moving towards. I feel, and like this new world. Hopefully, right? Like I talk about this, regularly. I feel like we're in this transition time, and let's see where it takes us. I think there's more people thinking about these kind of topics, and what the future could look like, and these interesting couple years that we just had behind us, they were kind of the catalyst to that, right? Because people saw, okay, there's something going on in the background, right? Not, people that weren't interested in geopolitics and stuff like that, they all of a sudden they saw, okay, there's a force there that's working against us, right? Like it's an interesting little phase that I'm in right now. Like you weren't allowed to go here and there, right? Like maybe it woke up a few, that's maybe.
Yeah, it definitely created people asking more questions.
Yeah.
I think that some people have a proclivity to always seek and to always say, well, why? Or like, how does that work? And some people are a little more passive about just like, oh, if that's what they say, I accept it. I think that those events allowed people that don't normally ask questions about authority started to ask questions. And question asking to me is a huge breakthrough. I like to think of it like everybody's living in a construct of a geometric shape. And many people that have been doing plant medicines for a while, I feel like you live in a circle. There's no seams. You recreate the reality that you want based on what you choose to believe in it. But there's so many people out there living in more of a square shape. And the seams are created by the government, by allopathic medicine, by whatever the doctor said, by this is what my grandma told me, so that's what I'm going to do, and I'm not going to question it. And as we start to question, what we do is we open those seams. And when you open those seams, you can destabilize someone's entire brain, how they make choice, what they trust and rely on under pressure. And people that don't want to do plant medicine, people that don't want to ask questions, you'll feel them defend these things that you're questioning. And in this defense, you're almost like up against a overdrive system in the brain, like, don't ask questions there. You can't ask questions there because if you do, it destabilizes my entire reality. So those of us that ask questions, we just learn like, oh, Aunt Sue's coming over. Like, don't bring up that topic. Like, she doesn't handle that topic well. Or my grandpa's coming over. So like, never mention this because he's just hard about it. Like, he can't question that seam. And I think people like you are creating conversations around seams, around topics that have been for others very unquestionable. And then by opening that seam, we can restructure choice. And people like us, we're going to watch and witness so much destruction. I mean, everything's collapsing. Religion is collapsing. Government is collapsing in different areas. Allopathic medicine is being totally looked at in a way that it hasn't. Allopathic medicine has just standard guard, like I am the authority and no one can question you. And now you have this whole curious generation that feels poisoned since we're children, that feels like we were told things that are not working, that are having elderly issues in our 30s or late 20s going, I don't trust any of you anymore. This doesn't make any sense. And as we start to restructure conversations and playful, neutral minded conversations and encourage experimentation with each other, we're going to have the opportunity to start shaping choice. And to me, when we shape choice, that's when we shape the world. It's all about choice. We have to know that there are more choices than just doing what the doctor said. Okay, that's what the doctor said. That's fine. What did the other doctor say? What did you find in your own research? And what feels good to experiment with? Where we're giving people the authorities back in them. And some people are very uncomfortable with that. They would much rather be told that they can take a pill and their little problems will go away.
I mean, I get it. Like if you have that choice in front of you, exactly these doctors that you talked about, they would say, let's say in my case, back in the day, they were like if you don't do this right now, if you don't put those metal plates in there, you will have pain for the rest of your life. And if you just fall down, you will break your neck and you will be, paralyzed, right? Like they paint you that picture, right? Like if you're not stable mentally, right? Like, and you're not in your power, right? You will fall down and down to that level and basically let them decide for you, right? And that's what happens all the time, right? Like it's that fear-driven society that we're in, right? And
Yeah.
it connects to everything, right? It's all about fear. And I mean, people watch TV all the time. They watch the news, like I was lucky, I never had a TV as a child either, right? So that was just
Beautiful.
amazing. Back in the
Yes.
day, I was like, fuck, I'm the only one that can't, play games on the TV. Then later, sure, I got my computer and stuff, but it was geeking out there. But like that TV thing was pretty much crucial, I would say. It's just like that bombardment with those negative news all the time. It's just insane.
A lot of my friends now, I'm 34 now, so all of us are getting very, like, we're established, like a lot of my friends have, young families, and some of us that don't have families are really focused on business. And so many of them are like, damn, I wish that I didn't have a TV too. Like, I have so many more books in my head than my friends, and I play so many instruments. And it's just like, well, if you don't have a TV, you have time for a half an hour a day of instrument practice. You have time
Yeah.
for, a half an hour in a fantasy book and a half an hour in a science book and a half an hour in a biography book. And the next thing you know, 3 years come by and you feel like an industry expert because you're like, oh no, I've read everything they wrote. Oh no, I've read everything they wrote.
Yeah.
And people don't realize that cumulative time builds up. I mean, 2 years, if you
Yeah.
don't watch TV, you have opened up huge void pockets that you have in your schedule for new growth, new learning, new hobbies, everything.
Yeah, but you swim against the current, right? I remember because I was playing piano since I was 5, I think, or 4 even,
Do you still
and it,
play?
it was just, yeah, well, not. I have one here, but I want to get back into it. Yeah,
Okay,
I
good.
stopped because I moved like out of the house when I was 15. I stopped. So I played for 10 years. I was fairly good, I guess. But it was always
Wow.
like, I always remember, you always like the weirdo, you're playing piano and like you're doing this, you're doing that. Like, why don't you come play football? Like
Yeah.
football was the most boring thing for me. Like, no fucking way. And yeah, but it's just like, it makes you, society makes you feel uncomfortable if you do these things, right? That are not, done by 95% of humanity, right? Like you're already, outside, you're the outsider,
Yeah, but being an outsider is where all the fun is.
right? Was
Yeah.
always the case, with me either. So it was same thing with that, that stuff. Like those last couple years, it's just normal to me. Like, yeah, sure, I'm the black sheep here. If you say so, that's all good. And it's that you have to learn that, right? Like if you feel uncomfortable and you're happy in that state, that's good. That's what it's all about. Being
Getting
uncomfortable.
brave with the discomfort. It's, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know how it is. Like everyone, is comfortable until they get punched in the face, right? Like it's kind of the same thing, right? Just
But when you get
paraphrasing, but
punched in the face 150 times, you're kind of like, that one was kind of weak. There's
right?
a little bit of
Yeah, because
waterboarding with
you're
it.
not gonna, yeah, you're gonna survive, right? Like you just get
Yeah.
back up. Yeah, that's the way it is.
Yeah. Then it
I wanted
changes.
to,
Hmm.
yeah, sure. I wanted to talk about hyaluronic acid a bit, because I worked in the beauty industry in my old life, a lot of transactional stuff, and you know, came into contact with that a lot. And it was interesting in the prep for this call, right? Because I saw, that you talk about that a lot. It's very much part of the fascia, and it's just weird to me, that like people inject it, right? And like that angle, I would like to explore a bit more because
Yeah.
how do you, because it's part of the fascia, like you can go into depth there and explain the whole thing, right? And like explain from scratch if you want to, but like what's like, how do you see those injections? Do they actually play a part, right, in the fascia, let's say, if you inject it in a way, or is that completely impossible to do,
Okay.
like an
So,
external?
yeah. Yeah. What a cool question. Thanks for asking that. Nobody has asked me that one before, but I feel you. So, if we were to look at the fascia under an ultrasound, which is like one of the best technologies actually to see what's going on, you see that where there's an adhesion, there is something called a densification. Some of the case papers will call it densification, some of them call it adhesions. And that just means that the fluid is stuck and it's not moving. So there's a pocket of this hyaluronic acid fluid that's completely encased or it's trapped in some way. And every fascia release technique is devoted to that problem right there, is finding the stuck spot and then creating motion. And there is so many different ways that they create motion. There's dry needling where they find it and then they stab it with a needle and then just mess up the tissues in order for it to be flowing again. Rolfing, they would find that and then manually shove your fingers like as deep as they can into that and then break it up where it's stuck. Um, some people are injecting it. There's this new institute, the Fascia Institute. They're doing a number of different things, but there are a couple that are injecting hyaluron into those spots. The hyaluron that's made synthetically is coming from turkey necks or shark umbilical cords. Um, our shark, and then also umbilical cords. Those are the main synthetics. They used to say that when we turn 30, our collagen production goes down significantly. So supplementing or with synthetic hyaluronic acid is a benefit. I'm at a point now where I believe the body can be prompted to create what we need through training. So, like, there's a way to create HGH through training. There's a way to create hyaluronic acid through training. And there's a way to stabilize your sex hormones through training. So, to me, our body is a self-regulating tool. We're just not accessing it correctly. So, by the fascia flow technique that I built is all about hyaluronic acid and getting it to move without damaging the fibers. So for those of you that don't know what hyaluronic acid is, it is a acid molecule that's rather large. It houses 1,600 water molecules. And remember, water is H2O, so there's double the amount of hydrogen. Hydrogen is very cool because it's electrostatic, meaning that the way that this fluid is actually moving over the fascia bands is like two negative magnets pushed together. So there's like a little magnet train of things pushing each other through the flow. It's not like normal water. So if you imagine kind of slapping water on the top of a pool, right? That whole pool acts together almost like it's one unit. If we were to slap a jar of honey, that would be equivalent to like hyaluronic acid. So there's a lot more surface tension. It almost sees itself as one unit. It's connected electrically through these electrostatic charges. So the hyaluronic acid is housing and holding the water in a structure that makes it push like a one unit through the water through the system. So that ultimate little hydrating part of our saliva, if we spit on something, it becomes hydrated. That's the hyaluronic acid. So to me, I don't really see any advantage at all at taking it orally, at using it topically. I'm a big fan of just conditioning the body to make it over and over and over. And it's been kind of fascinating. Like, I'm excited to unbox this science more strategically in the next 5 years, because right now I have like 60-year-old women that have been practicing, and they send me borderline nudes because their skin all over their body is shifting. It's becoming more youthful. They feel more young, and they're like, how is this affecting my stomach skin when I'm only doing my lower body? And it's because we're rehabilitating the hyaluronic acid through the whole system. Your body knows what's to do with it. Your body knows where it's dry. We just needed to prompt the creation of so much more. And we didn't know that could happen until 2018. And then even in those case studies, Dr. Carla Stecco was the one that found something called a fibrocyte. And a fibrocyte is a cell that exists within the fascia, and it creates more hyaluronic acid. So we didn't even know this was possible until a handful of years ago. And as she's been looking at it for medical science, I've just immediately wanted to apply it to the body. So I kind of feel like in the information age, we're skipping steps. Normally, like, new ideas hang out in medical culture for 20 to 30 years before they're unboxed. And I feel like I'm skipping that timeline a little bit. And I'm like, just give me the juice, let's start to play. Let's see what we can
reverse
do.
engineer.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know
sometimes
about
jumping
you,
is
but
cool. I have nothing
yeah,
against that. Sometimes it's
let's
good to
speed it up.
go there and then move backwards a bit, right, and try to understand what happened.
Yeah, I feel like I'm translating for them. I mean, the doctor nomenclature in literature is so heady and so boring that I don't think most fitness professionals have the heart or the soul to sit there and kind of translate it into what is actually functional. And thank goodness for my brain. I can just, eat some blueberries and chocolate and just dive in. And then 6 hours later, I emerge and it just does something, it digests in my system, and then it distills. And then I feel like that's what I'm presenting online. I'm just like, hey, here's the distillation of all this stuff. Hope you like it.
Amazing. Yeah, I sometimes feel like we are the generation of, that translates, right? Or like we're between the old and the new, right? Like it's us. We have to do this,
Yeah,
and
so
then
that we
there's
don't mess up
oftentimes
the next generation.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I say that often too. I just actually just posted a video today about that, where, I think I have faith in the next generation, right? Like that's my job, right? Like I put a lot of time and effort and thought into the next generation because, I saw that our generation, a big part of them is kind of lost, and there's no there's no hope with a lot of those people, right? But there is a crucial part that could, switch and start thinking about stuff.
If they choose.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm with you.
if
We're
they
not their
choose to, yeah, I'm
teachers.
not pushing
Yeah.
anyone. That was my mistake in my, when I still went to uni, because I thought about like a lot of things that nobody was thinking about, and I always try to push it onto them. I'm like, how can you not think about this? This is the future, right? Like, how do you accept this, right? Like, how do you accept the government like this, right? Like, I would always like just, like give my energy away on the stuff, and I just waste my energy basically, and people just didn't care, right? And then I stopped talking about it. And just with the podcast, I started coming out and like talking about this again. It took a few years to regroup, and because I saw the benefit, right? Because exactly what you said, that if you just spark that idea just with a couple people, you get those vibrations up. Like, we can offset a lot, just a couple people that ask these
Can
intelligent questions.
I get that? I had this dream the other night, and I was like, wow, that's such a. It was an image of. It was the dream, like zoomed me in and then zoomed me back out. And when it was zoomed out, it was this like massive blob that was moving towards a direction. And then it zoomed me in, and there was a bunch of people, right? Linked arms. And like, to me, it was thought leaders. It was like my homies that are pushing energy medicine, my homies that are challenging the allopathic norm in their own industries. And we were all linked arms. It was like hyaluronic acid, is how I was picturing it. And we were moving along the edge of this like big mass that was moving in this direction. And as we were linking arms, we were just changing the choice on the outer edge. And as the choices of the outer edge changed, the mass that was following behind it started to shift. I have goosebumps everywhere.
Wow.
And I like messaged my business partner. I was like, this is just the beginning. Like the network that we're building is going to be global. And as long as we're all holding hand, moving in another direction, the waves of what we're going to do is going to make sense in time. And we just have to keep marching along and experiencing failure and getting up the next day and doing it again. Because we're holding an outer edge of choice, and those of us that can, have, prophetic dreams, downloads of the future, visions of the future, those are the people that are concerned about the direction. It's because it's natural. If you can add 50 years, if you can add 7 generations to our thought, to our choices, like, okay, nothing changes. Let's take it 7 generations down. Where are we? Highly questionable. So if we're highly questionable, we need to look at our choices now. And for a lot of people can't see the future. They're not doing that kaleidoscope X-ray vision through choice 10,000 times. So to open up people to different choice, different options, that's the edge. The edge is choice. Yeah. It's choice. If we can guide choices to be healthier and different over time, everything can shift. And that to me is like the most hopeful thing. Regardless of what the older generation is going to choose to do, we need to guide choices here, now, today.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. That's it. There's always a choice. Doesn't matter with what, right?
Even not choosing not to make a choice is still a choice, and the choice of what kind of shoe companies are we going to support for the next 7 generations? Are we building ridiculous shoes or smart shoes? What kind of fabrics should we be wearing? Because right now everybody's in plastic. Is that the best option long term, or should we all be wearing EMF proof suits? If we're going to choose tech, we maybe need to up the warrior wear for our magnetics. Simple things like skincare. The adult diaper industry in America alone is a $13 billion industry, and there's no companies that have organic cotton. There's just like pick an industry, pick an industry. There's brokenness everywhere.
Yeah, of course.
We just got to clean it up.
Yeah, it just, like, anywhere you look, there's stuff that we could improve on. And I mean, it's just like, just when I go out now after the summer season, just go to the beach, like, people just throw their cigarettes on the floor, and it will end up in the sea, right? And nobody's cleaning it up, right? And it's just these things, there's these little things, like, but people don't think about that, and we're like in the middle of Europe, right? I've been to India, more than 10 years ago, and I get it why people there are used to throwing stuff on the floor and stuff, because they still have to think about their food on a daily basis, for example, right? And just used to chucking it there, and it's dirty. But it's like here, like you have a different level of life, right? Like you don't have to, you have food on the table, you have a roof over your head, right? Like why don't you, at least take care of the environment a little bit, right? Like we're not even talking about, buying, pineapple leather shoes here, right? Like
Yeah.
it's just that thing that you consume, and then instead of throwing it on the floor, you just, chuck it in the bin. Yeah, it's baffling sometimes, but as you said, we have the choice, and I think these types of conversations, they will help with choice, and people will think about these things, and just sometimes like a little conversation, right, will tipple someone over and into another direction, right, and they will think about fascia now, and they will think about alcohol
Yeah.
and these types of topics.
Man, the best thing for our fascia is to wake up and drink water. You mentioned water before, and that conversation has gotten a little more complex for me the last couple of weeks. I've been diving into the
Yeah,
hydrogen conversation a little, and people are ionizing it. I've seen a lot of different models for machines now. The difference is
Kangen water
how,
and so on.
yeah, for me, there's
Yeah,
this old pagan philosophy. Like before we had religion create holy water, before like the Catholics were using holy water, the pagans were using it forever, and they would make
yeah,
holy water different. They wouldn't do their Jesus prayer over it. They would do um, they would expose the water to light for 21 days, 21 to 28 days. It depends on the literature that you read about it. I like 28 because
yeah.
it's a full moon cycle. And the best
Mm,
water I ever drank ever was for sure the water that I made. And I would hold it in a glass bucket, and I put it under this statue that's in my yard. And 28 days later, you could take a glass of it and drink it. And it tasted like rainbow light. I don't know how else to describe it, but wow, spectacular. I got obsessed for a little while. I'd have these glass bottles I would fill up, and then I would just you have 30 of them, and each day I had one, and then I would recycle it. So I was like on a month filtering, and people would be like, "What are you doing with all these glass?" And I was like, "It's rainbow light. It is the most exquisite water you've ever tasted." But it felt like it was
weirdo. Yeah,
supercharged,
yeah.
you
Yeah,
know?
totally. I mean, I think about that a lot as well, because like people think they're hydrating when they just drink water from the tap, and they're just like, they have no idea what's going on.
Mm,
Just no idea.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a big topic. I mean, I'm that person that when I see, when I'm in a restaurant and I get Nestle water, I send it back.
Yeah,
Just
me too. I'm bougie about
I'm
the
like,
water I want.
yeah, I'm very strict with
Bring it
that
in a
stuff.
glass bottle, please. Thank you.
Yeah, because I mean, a lot of people don't think about that. Like microplastic and that water and no salt, right? Like doesn't stay in the body, right? Just gets flushed out straight away, and then they wonder why they have wrinkly skin. And,
Yeah. Yeah, and then what I'm noticing is that it's a choice. It's a choice to have wrinkly
yeah,
skin. It's a choice to be
yeah,
dehydrated. There's little things that we can do to make an impactful change. But playing with all these magnetic technologies, like all these people are saying this is the best thing for the water, I still haven't found anything better than just pure sun moonshine, sun and moonlight. For a month, nothing's touched how that feels.
mm. Yeah. We bought a bunch of land, and we're gonna build a well there. I think that's the game, to play. Like have a well and just
Yeah.
see what to do with that. Maybe just like get it into a big bowl that's in the light, and just drink from that. It could be interesting.
I have a well here, but we're
Oh,
in
nice.
Florida. Everything is so low
Mm,
that, like the aquifer that it pulls from the limestone, there's so much sulfur in the water.
mm.
And it's funny because, like, as a skincare, like sulfur is one of the best things you can ever put on your face
Yeah.
for in a little acne bug. It'll just rip it right out. But drinking the water is not good.
I was
So
just in
we
Italy.
still have to play with it. But
Yeah, I was just in Italy 2 weeks ago, and just in the middle of Umbria, so kind of a little bit north of Rome. And it's the same thing there, right? Like they have these terme, right? And then the water comes out of the well, and it's like full with sulfur, right? And I also did a ceremony there, did an Iboga ceremony,
mm.
and we drank it before to cleanse, right? We had like a couple liters of that, and we did a
Huh.
combo ceremony, and then after the Iboga and stuff. But it was very interesting because we drank a lot of that, and we just literally pull everything out, right? And then we went to a different tournament, we got the water from there, and that was a hydrating one. Taste wise, similar, right? Very strong, and like it was hard to swallow in the beginning, but
Yeah.
you get used to it. But definitely two different waters, just like a couple 100 meters apart, the wells, right? And one was just cleansing, like literally cleansing the intestines, like full on, and the other one, was the one with the minerals, and it stayed in.
How interesting. Was an iboga ceremony 3 days? Was it a full 3 day?
It wasn't 3 days. It was kind of like one full day, because it was more like it was my first one, and it was a
Yeah.
soft introduction. Well,
Okay.
whatever
Yeah, I've
soft
heard
is to other
very
people, but
intense things about that. So
yeah, it was definitely yeah. You just don't go into these things with expectation, because it always
yeah.
comes differently. But it was definitely work, right? It's not like an LSD or anything like that. If people have experienced that, like it's, you cannot just lay there and do nothing, right? Like it's work, like you're working back and forth with the medicine, right? And it's kind of like a conversation.
That's how I always
Yeah.
felt about peyote. I've done ayahuasca like 15 times in very ceremonial settings, and what a
Yeah.
privilege to experience ceremony with all of the magical ancient things in place. People that go and experience it, and there's no sacred circle, there's no fire, they're indoors. It's just like, wow, you guys are missing the whole. Like, I don't know how you can move the energy without the fire, without a structure around it, without the Icaros, without everybody
Yeah.
sitting at the proper doors and spinning the energy together. Like, how do you keep it safe? And I was telling someone, if you're called to medicine, find someone who's native to the medicine, find someone who's native to the original ceremony. And I was talking to them about iboga, and I'm like, wow, one of these days I'd love to go and sit for, and then here you mention it. But I've heard that.
It just came to me. Yeah.
Wow, that's, yeah. I think that you
Yeah.
bond yourself to the interstitium through that kind of magical working, because when you see it, no one can take that experience away from you. The tree is never just the tree. You are connected to that tree through the mycelium network of the ground, and you can feel that through your feet, and you can breathe into it through your body, and it is never just a tree again. And I've heard with iboga, death is never the same, because you see that as we depart, we just lose the body. We lose the privilege of the body, but we're still alive in the interstitium. The space between things is a hypercharged electrical organizable space that is emitting frequency and light through it. And we're using it all the time with our phones and our laptops, yet we're not bridging the gap to realize that we are part of the same particle processor that everything else is operating in. We are just like those radio towers, except alive, animate, disconnected from the ground, but we have access to all those same frequencies. And I've heard iboga anchors you to the etheric frequency kind of better than any of the other medicines. So good for you taking that dive, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, I went in there to work on my focus, right? So I got that ADD stamp in my childhood, also asthma, fourth generation, which is also like what I'm working on heavily, right? Because I know it's not there to stay, and I'm the one that's gonna get rid of it. And went in there with that intention, and usually that's not what people do with that, but like I felt like that was the right thing to do, and it was very interesting. It just brought up all these old memories, right, that were just laying on top of my nervous system that I had completely forgotten, right? Just one after the other. I was just dissolving them, like just one after the other,
cleaning them out.
Yeah, so interesting. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I know you're oversimplifying a lot there, but thank you for sharing that little nugget.
Yeah, it's I might do a video just about that, maybe on my YouTube at some point, but I'm still
I would be
microdosing
interested,
it.
just so you know, somebody like me. Yeah, I'd be interested in what the iboga experiences was like.
Yeah, I'm microdosing it now for the integration still.
Good for you.
Which is also not really usual. And
yeah.
So once that's done, then I will get like calm down a bit and like breathe and see if I can put it into words. But
yeah, good luck with that. That's like, to me, the hardest part. It's the poetic's responsibility to like, okay, you saw that, now use words. And it's like, all right,
good luck with that. Exactly. Yeah. And I don't even know if it's the right thing to do. I will see. I will just let I would be guided. I would just surrender and if I'm called to talk about it, I will. If not, then it's also fine, because it's just the beginning. I'm that was literally the first one, and I know it was just a soft one, and there's more, because I felt it. That was like this hand that was reaching over, but
Yeah.
it wasn't the time yet, right? So it will be next time.
There's there's this there's this thing, man, about relaxing into the unknown. And it's people like you that I think are really pushing it. I'm sure you've heard of Terrence McKenna.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and his brother, he has a huge farm here and
Yeah,
grows a lot of different medicine plants. And I feel like it's the sprinkling of seeds. But when the ancients have been doing this, like as I lived outside for a year, there was something happened that 3 months into living outside completely, that the sky changed. The sky was my ceiling and the grass was my floor. I was no longer confined to inside. The world felt like my room. And when I would go inside, I could immediately feel that there was no more wind. And it felt very disconnecting. Inside felt very sterile, very artificial. The energy would get
yeah.
stuck. People would be way too close to each other. You didn't have this like breeze and movement between others. And it's my dog knocking on the door there. And when you're talking about this, I'm just reminded of like how much the brain changes based on conditional things. And it's like as you're integrating that, I'm sure you're loving being outside. I'm sure you're loving like being more barefoot and in the sunshine all the time. And I
I'm
think
barefoot all
sometimes
the time.
people, yeah,
Don't wear any shoes. Yeah.
yeah, that's basically where I'm at. Only flip flops, and there is this exchange between our body system and the earth that I think is so ancient. And when we can actually drop into that for like a 90-day retreat, my ears changed. I could count how many lizards, like I felt like in my head. I'd walk by a bush and I could hear the little scrambling of lizards. And there was part of my brain that said there's 12 lizards in there. It was like there was this tuning mechanism with my mechanoreceptors in my skin that turned back on after being outside for 90 days. And then I rode that out for another 9 months. And my night vision is still unbelievable. Like I can see what other people call complete darkness. I'm just like, what's wrong with you? Here, hold my hand. But there was things that came online with sleeping outside, like even how my ears could tune to what sounded like a storm, what sounded like an animal, how far away that animal was. There was so much more information in the sounds and the textures and the feelings. I could smell the rain coming. And I feel all of us have these abilities. It's just a matter of
Yeah.
putting ourselves in the frequencies to reintegrate back into that power.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's also, taking off these layers that are on top, right? Like if if your microbiome is fucked up, right? Like if you have all of these heavy metals in there, like you're not gonna get there, I think, right? I've been on this deep detox journey, that all started with that neck thing, like 6 years ago or whatever it is, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's a long one and it's a difficult one, to get that heavy metal out of your body. Yeah, just take this. No, it's not easy. No, it's not, definitely not as easy as that. And it just takes time, right? Because you have to take care of this first and then that, and it's like, step-by-step process. And it's not just taking a pill, right? Because it is all connected to lifestyle as well, and how well you
Choice.
sleep, right? Exactly. Choice, what your hydration is again, right? And
Are you drinking
yeah,
water or coffee? That tiny little choice changes so much when you're sitting in
right.
ceremony. You're sitting with your body, you're sitting with your tension. To me, it's all distilling down to flow. If the
Yeah.
body's in a state of flow and you can create flow in the deepest way, there's not going to be much that's stuck on you, right? And then the breath, when we shape the breath to be as mighty as possible, it seems that the brain waves drop. So for somebody like you and I who are trying to push that brainwave edge of soberness, like trying to integrate with definitely higher frequencies, but with the physical body being present, right?
Yeah.
To me, that connection is going to happen when there's the flow in the fascia, like everything is flowing, and the breath is mighty, where we can hang out at one breath a minute for 20 minutes. or 10 minutes, and just kind of keep riding that meditative monk like in between. And it could like, I think people are going to have great crazy experiences chanting when they can do that. I mean, chanting, when you look at meditative philosophies from around the world, chanting is a huge gap bringer. Like they would purposefully chant in these caves that had resonant capacity with 100 people. And it seemed like they could dial that frequency of breath rate in together, and then also create a cymatic chamber of a natural tone. I've been playing with some of the binaural beats, and I just feel like it's gotten too far away from the ancient. It's like we just need to ohm it out, or not really ohm. There's only so many vowel shapes across all religions. There's like, here's the 5 vowel shapes. Let's play with these in ancient structures and see what happens when we loop those. I'm over the binaural beat. It feels like an artificial tweaking of my thymus glands. It's like, we don't need this.
It is, right? Like, it's just like when my son is, I don't know, his teeth are growing or whatever, right? Like, put that on the speaker, the humming, or just like some sort of vibration, right? It's not gonna resonate with him. I put him on my chest, I do the same thing, he falls asleep, right? Just simple as that. Like, it's a simple example. And like, if you also think about the bells that they took out of all these buildings and all the big ones, right, out of these churches and stuff like that, right? They had a big part of, right, in that whole journey back then, right? But that's also never talked about, right?
The cymatic part of during the Iboga ceremony, did they play the native, like, African prayer songs?
No. I was very much by myself, breathing, and it was like proper intonal thing. Yeah.
Interesting. I always like wonder what those would feel like because they say in the old ceremonies you would sit around a fire, and then the shaman would fan the fire at a certain BPM, and then the light changing would drop you into a different frequency, and then they would drum, and you just gotta wonder.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Like, I know what you talked about before. Like, that's obviously the the situation that we should strive for. To travel to the African jungle and, like, do it there. But
let's go, Max. I'll go with you.
Yeah. It's definitely on my list for sure. That's
mine too.
That's I've been called to Africa for a while now. This is like my last resort here in Europe, and if I want to stay positive, but, like, let's see what happens in the next few years, right? And if whatever happens is not to my liking, then I will probably be down there somewhere.
Yeah, you'll answer the call no matter where the world goes. I mean, we're all beacons. Some of my closest friends, we were all together down here, and now literally out of the 9 of us, there's only 2 here, and everyone is sprinkled around the world. Around the world. And I just wonder, I'm just like, wow, did we just have like a little micro unit of our magnetics being together, and then we exploded, and now we're all still connected, but we're all over the place. And it's just interesting how I think we all are needing to be wherever we're supposed to be at the right times. There's a lot of unknowns right now around the world. And to me, it's like, as long as there's the people who can think clearly are in the right spaces, we'll be fine. Calm, creative, solution-minded problem solvers,
Yeah.
It's a little bit
and
of them.
Like, try not to be in that triangular position between 5G towers, because that will not let you think clearly, right?
I have 3 within like a mile of me here, and I do have daydreams about blowing them up. Like, occasionally it's the most aggressive, violent thoughts I have.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah, but see, that's maybe your nervous system telling you something. Like, you have to get out of there.
I know. I just love this.
That
land.
stuff is nasty. Like, my son, when he was born, we were still in the city in Germany, and we were like right in the middle of the city, and he just wouldn't sleep properly. And I feel that stuff. I get headaches and like get these sounds. Like, after some time when I'm in a weird spot and I have one on top of the building or just across the window. And so I always knew. I knew it from my mother. She's very sensitive to them, and I apparently am as well. So you know, it's just the way it is. But we moved out. We moved here to the beach. Now we have one that's like on top of the hill behind us. On the other side, it's the sea. So it's like you're not even in that, you know, nasty triangle, because that's the nasty part, right? Like if you have that,
Huh.
because they're constantly communicating, they're
Okay.
constantly sending information around, right? So that's the new thing about these 5G towers. The 3G, they were different. They were just, you know, communicating one way, but those are communicating in a triangle.
Thank you for that. Interesting.
But yeah, so yeah, I just got out of it, and as soon as we were out of that situation, out of that location, just fine sleeping, all of us.
You
like
know, there's
crazy.
two weird inventors that I was exposed to in the 90s, and I can't find any of their stuff online. I've had people be
Mm.
like, "Where did you find this out?" I'm like, "I don't know. My inventor friend burned me a CD, and I have both of his lectures on an old CD that just says Ormus on."
Yeah,
And
yeah.
this inventor built a. Do you know what Ormus is? You familiar with that
Ormus.
word? Yeah. It's an acronym for orbitally rearranged monatomic substances, and it's the molecules that come off of the shoreline. When we're walking
Okay.
on the beach
Now
and
I
your
know what you're
feet
talking about.
are in the
Now I
water,
know what you're
yeah,
talking about.
we're
Yeah, yeah.
ingesting it. And there's people who make little elixirs of them. I've made it like
Mm,
7 times now and did a
mm,
few experiments with different kinds of salts, different parts of where the moon cycle was. People always said during full moon you get triple the harvest. And I'm like, no way, for sure, 100%. During full moon, you get triple the harvest.
mm.
Um, but you take salt water and then you break the salt water atoms apart with this very intense acid. And as the acid is breaking apart, there's these basically random particles that exist that like start to come out of nowhere. Literally gold, silver, titanium, all these minerals that were depleted in will magically auto-populate within the cauldron stirring of your salt water. And it's a pretty intense thing. But this gentleman built a pyramid out of Ormus and the same philosophies. And he was able to push magnetic charges from his property out. And I always just felt like maybe I'll just build one of those little things. And I've been looking for his information everywhere. I gotta contact my
I,
old inventor friend.
I have information on that topic. I can send you some
Okay,
stuff. Yeah,
cool.
it's definitely interesting stuff. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, because it's if
yeah.
it is a
It's because it's all
magnetic
connected.
core,
It's all
if
connected. Like it's not just, it doesn't just come out of the salt water. You can actually like affect the atmosphere just with the right setup.
yeah, and it's the
Yeah,
structure of it. And it was like
yeah.
this guy was playing with either a conical or a pyramid shape. But I always
Spirals.
wonder, yeah,
Spirals.
if it's
Yeah,
magnetic, then we could just build a bit different magnetic charge, right? So
yeah,
if these towers are messing with us, then like okay, let's just build the inverse of that, and I'll protect my
yeah.
space.
There's a guy out of the German speaking countries, and he got into big trouble building those. Obviously,
For what?
yeah. They're all. That's why, you know, like it's not like the best thing to talk about publicly, but it's like I know about this stuff, and it's very interesting. Like as soon as I, you know, as soon as you have, let's say, a farm, you should be thinking about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I do. I do have a farm. I've been playing with electroculture stuff, but they installed another
Mm.
radio tower with on Everglades property without communicating to any of us. So they were just shipping over. Like I don't even
Crazy.
know how they got permission to cut through the land because all that land is protected. But they were drop shipping like pieces of the tower with helicopter. So it was like for a couple months there was just all these helicopters bringing stuff. And you're like, what are they doing? The next thing you know, there was a tower erected um, on on like Everglades land. It was very confusing.
I know you
Yeah.
wonder why all these alligators are going crazy soon,
I have
right?
crazy dreams about the alligators. You have no idea. I have like I'll wake up and
Yeah.
I'll be like, there's 50. And my dreams are wild, but I'll have these dreams that there's like 50 alligators that are like trying to push through this irrigation ditch that they like blocked off part of the alligator migration pattern. I'll wake up and I'll be like, part of my soul wants to go like jetpacking over the Everglades and just see where these poor alligators, because I feel like the alligators are trying to tell me like, listen, we're stuck. We can't get to our normal canal system because you guys put a metal thing here. Isn't that weird? Sorry to mention that.
Do
This
you
has been so
notice?
much
Do you
more
notice picture?
conversational.
No, no. Did you notice picture from the WEF, right, where they, were promoting, you kind of donating to save some forest, right, like in Southeast Asia, I think it was, and then there's this picture and it zooms out, and they just kind of saved that little square in the middle, and everything around was basically, just like bare land, because they took off all the trees, right, and there was just like that habitat left, for that one monkey or whatever it was, right, and that's how they operate, right. So that's what people donate for and to, and
Random. Are you
who the
familiar
fuck
with the
knows.
band Hylung?
No.
Oh, okay. There's this band, I love them. They're neo-pagan folk metal, and they're based out of like Norway, Sweden. But for every ticket sold, they donated like money for a forest. And I'm just like, wow, that says, but they toured the world and they sold out so many shows that they're actually going to be able to rehabilitate like 50 acres of land. And um, I just like I have all these. I've been collecting seeds from something called the Tree of Life. It's like a ceiba tree or a kapok tree, and as it harvests, it's called the Tree of Life because it feeds so many pollinators, so many animals. We can take the cotton and harvest it to wear clothing, and I have 10,000 seeds, and I'm having a little party to take these seeds and put them into like onto easements and put them onto land that they've ripped apart and then didn't build on. And it's just like, how many generations will it take if we just all made it normal and natural to plant seeds? Like all of the seeds from our compost, those should all be thrown. Apparently, that's like a cultural thing in Japan where you
Mm.
collect your seeds and then you throw them through the highway. And that way, like, there's always food for multiple generations. I mean, it's just little choices like that.
Yeah.
Huge impact 7 generations from now, you
Yeah.
know?
There's a tree called Polonia. I don't know if you know it.
Mm-mm.
And it grows super fast, right? Like it has the most CO2 intake because it has very big leaves and it grows very fast. So you can actually, harvest it like after 12 years, 15 years, and then you can build surfboards out of it or instruments out of it because it's like a very, very good timber, and it grows super fast. And that's like one of these trees that, just like you don't have to take care of it, right? Like you chop it off and it regrows like from the same stem, right?
That's
And
amazing.
it's not expensive, and like I'm like in contact with people that are doing this kind of work, and like you can basically invest in those plantations and stuff, and like it would be such an easy way to make the environment like so much better and so much
Better
more healthy. But
choices. Just keep
yeah.
talking about better choices. Plant those seeds, Max, all over the world.
Yeah, it's coming soon, like that work for me, but yeah, I'm very deep on the theoretical side of things with these things, but yeah, you have to think about them
Remember,
first before you do them.
dude, but the philosophers are important. The philosophers of each century steer art and popular culture and book writing. Like
Yeah,
the most dangerous minds in the world are the philosophers and the poets, because the
yeah.
philosophers and the poets steer the population. So, like, don't dismiss all the work that you're doing. Those
No, no,
ceremonies are
I'm
important.
not.
You
No, I'm not. No,
download for
it's just
us in the
sometimes
ethers.
yeah, just because I got to that point where I wasn't surrendering anymore, and I had this plan, right, like this master plan of what's supposed to happen, and then the universe said, okay, wait a second, take a few steps back. It's not supposed to work this way, right? Like you don't have to plan everything, right? And that's why I said that, because the more I invest into that, like, right, then I get this little break and like go back to my surrender and see what happens, right? So
I wanted
interesting.
to save the world in my 20s and I got burnt out too. And I
Yeah.
hit a wall and I'm like, nobody cares. Nobody cares about fixing the problems. And all I see is problems everywhere. And I spent 3 years depressed, riding
Mm.
around on a golf cart after my divorce. And I could work on the golf cart like a couple days a week. And I was outside the whole time. It was a very circular conversation. I got really funny. I felt like I really worked on jokes out there. But I was sad. I was sad that I felt like the only person who cared about all these problems that I saw. And I think I came full circle when I realized that I could just help. And if anybody listened, great. But if nobody listened, at least I tried. And I wasn't going to attach myself to the result. I was just going to do it. And whatever happens, happens. And I think that like freed me up. It was like I stopped trying to bring the world with me. It was like, okay, I'm just going to play my part and have a good time playing my part. And if good things occur from it, I did it, you know? But if nobody listens, I'm not going to lose sleep about it either, you know?
Totally. That's all we can do, you know. I basically just stick to speaking my truth, you know, being authentic, and like everything that's attached to that, you know, is fine, right? Because I think, like, especially for us men, you know, if we don't speak our truth, then everything else won't be the way it's supposed to be, right? Like it's just like a falsified kind of reality after that. But yeah, that's beautiful. I think you have to go soon, and I hope we'll run this back and talk about, you know, some science stuff again.
It was a
Some
pleasure to
more
get to
in-depth
know you,
stuff.
Max. Yeah, I
Yeah,
feel like
likewise.
this was so much more of a conversation than I normally have. Normally, they're like milking me
Perfect.
for exercises and like good info. This felt so much more like two people trying to do our best navigating those worlds. And I feel like the people that are going to listen to this be like, wow, I vibe. I've been feeling that, you know, that pocket of depression that you and I both touched on, like when you're trying to fix things and then you you
Yeah.
dial it back and then you re-get into it and you're like, it's okay, everything's going to be okay eternally, but let's do our best anyway. So
Yeah.
thanks for this. I hope we have another pocket of time together.
Pleasure. Now, for sure, we'll do it. Thank you. Thank you for the time.
Awesome. Absolutely.
Thank you for watching this episode to the end. If you got any value out of it, I'd love to invite you to, you know, send it to a friend, leave a review or a thumbs up as well. This will help the channel a lot. I thank you for that. And I sincerely hope I'll see you on the next one.